Hello, Cedar Falls, how are you? Thank you for coming to my piano recital. I kind of think our entire country should be a women's center, you know what I mean? We could use it. It's a thrill to be campaigning here with you all tonight, in part because we are on the cusp of voting, and you all are among the most powerful, influential people in our country today. Except for the underage person here in front. I know it does not feel that way. You're living your lives, doing your thing, coming to check out the occasional presidential candidate who comes through. But I've done the math. Do you know how many Californians each Iowan caucus goer is worth? 1,000 Californians each, that's right. So look around this room tonight. How many of us are here? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 1,600 people here tonight. The biggest event anyone's ever seen. It legitimately looks like there are a couple hundred people here tonight, which would be 5 football stadiums full of Californians. That's a lot of power. That's the power you all have to do something that our fellow Americans only dream of, and that's push this country in a new direction. So the question is, what are you going to do with that power and influence on Monday? Raise your hand if you've seen TV ads with me on them. Good, because we spent a lot of money on those ads. So if you've seen anything about the campaign, you know I'm not a professional politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver. And I'm running to solve a problem or a challenge that we as a country have been struggling with for years and have not figured out. And the easiest way to frame this question or challenge is this: why is Donald Trump our president today? Or more close to home, how did Donald Trump win Iowa, a traditionally purple swing state that's right up the middle, by almost 10 points in 2016? If you turned on cable news at any point in the last several years, we've been offered a whole series of explanations as to why Donald Trump's our president. I know you've gotten these reasons presented to you. The most common job in our economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. When her store closes, what is her next job going to be? We're not sure. Someone at another event said McDonald's, but McDonald's now has the self-serve kiosks. How much did Amazon pay in tax? Buffet. They say that 5,000 people stop at Iowa 80 every day. How many people will stop there if the trucks no longer have drivers in the front? Not that many. Cedar Falls, we're in the midst of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say the words 4th Industrial Revolution? 4 seconds ago. And I'm barely a politician. So this is what I realized. Imagine being a guy who'd gotten medals and awards for starting an organization that created thousands of jobs around the country. I was honored by the Obama administration multiple times, so I got to bring my wife Evelyn to meet the president. My in-laws were very excited about me that week. So imagine being this guy where everyone's like clapping you on the back, and then you're feeling and realizing it's like, no, you don't get it. I'm pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom. And then the water rushing out the bottom of the hole brings Donald Trump into the White House. Our country doesn't understand what's happening to it. We're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have next to nothing to do with. If you go to a factory in Michigan, you don't find wall-to-wall immigrants doing work. What do you find? Wall-to-wall robot arms and machines doing work that people used to do. So in 2017, I went to our nation's capital. I went to our people in DC, and I said, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition, this transformation? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I said, what are we going to do?
Study it.
Yeah, someone up here just made the like, whoa, like sort of Scooby-Doo noise. That's a pretty good DC imitation. The three responses I got out of DC were these. Number one, we cannot talk about this, Andrew. Number two, we should study this further. Number three, the most common, you've heard this one. We must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Raise your hand if you've heard that. Oh yeah, that sounds sort of responsible. But I'm the numbers guy. I went looking at the numbers again. And do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? You know it's low because I'm anchoring you low. But you also know it's low because you know human beings. You know if you fire hundreds of manufacturing workers, you don't all walk outside and say, I'm here for my coding retraining program. I'll be at the laptop in no time. The success rates of those government-funded retraining programs for the manufacturing workers were abysmally low, 0 to 15%. The reality is that almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest, instead of getting retrained, almost half of them left the workforce and never worked again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in these communities to the point where America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row. Do you know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? World War II's a great guess. World War I's a great guess. Great Depression's a great guess. You have to go a little bit further back. It's the Spanish flu of 1918. A global pandemic that killed millions a century ago. You have to go back 100 years because it's highly unusual for life expectancy in a developed country to ever decline. It ordinarily goes up and up because we're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But in the US, it went down and then down and then down again. And when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them cut me off and said something that brought me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this. Because fundamentally, Washington, D.C. is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years with the wave. And you're not going to believe this, Cedar Falls, but 2 years ago, that was 2 years ago today. And we are here at the cusp of voting. I stand before you, fourth in the polls and rising to be the Democratic nominee. We raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there was no corporate PAC money in there. This is all just grassroots, people power donations, Americans trying to take our government back and make it work for us again instead of who it's working for now. Because who is it working for now? The tech companies, the drug companies. Pretty much if your first name is big and your last name is company, then our government is right there for you. If your first name is something else, your last name anything else. If your corporate profits are going up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you care about? If you're us, you care about life expectancy. But if you're DC, you just follow the money. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? None of us knows. But business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to distribute the swamp. Why would you employ hundreds of thousands of government workers in the most expensive city in your country? Why wouldn't you move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa? You would save billions of dollars immediately, and I would argue that those government agencies would make better decisions because they were living someplace normal and not in a DC bubble where they just talk to each other. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. Their job should be to go to DC, do your work, and then come home. It should not be to go there and say, ooh, I like it here. Let me try and stay forever. And Cedar Falls, I know how we're going to pass term limits. I'll be your president a year from now. Thank you very much for that. And then I'll go to Congress and say, hey, we should really have 12-year term limits, both houses. Make it much more dynamic, responsive, you can vote your conscience more easily. And here's how we pass it. I would say 12-year term limits, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'd pass that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they'd pass that. They would say, we do this for the American people. Because it doesn't affect them, it affects anyone who comes after them. They just walk around being like, I can still do whatever I was going to do. But then eventually they'd phase out, and then we'd have a legislature that's actually much more responsive and dynamic. I also have a plan for how we wash out the lobbyist cash that has been running our capital for years now. Right now, 5% of Americans or less donate to political campaigns. So if you donated to a campaign in the past 12 months, pat yourself on the back. You're literally in the top 5% of Americans by like political engagement. Pat yourself on the back extra hard if it was my campaign. So how the heck do we get that percentage up? My plan is to give every American voter 100 democracy dollars that you can use on any candidate or campaign you want. Essentially, think of it as like a voucher. You send it to the candidate or campaign, they get $100. How many Americans, or what percentage of Americans do you think would give to a candidate or campaign if they literally could like do it for free?
More than 5%.
So someone said everyone, but Americans are kind of lazy. Come on, you never get 100%. But then someone else said 50%, and I think that's about right. And if you get it to 50%, you wash out the lobbyist cash by a factor of 4 to 1. Because if you get 10,000 Americans to send you 100 democracy dollars, that's $1 million. Then if the lobbyist comes with their $80,000 check, you're like, I don't want to mess with the people here because they're funding everything I'm doing. Like, you can keep your cash. You see how this can work? We can retake our democracy. We must retake our democracy. Because right now, it's going, if you have money on one side and people on the other, who's winning right now in the United States of America? Yeah, the money's winning on an epic scale. And I talked about how Amazon's closing 30% of our stores and malls and paying $0. It's not just Amazon that's getting this free ride at the very top. If $1 trillion tech company like Amazon is paying $0 in taxes, is it their fault? No, it's kind of their job to try and pay $0 in taxes, right? So whose fault is it?
Washington.
It's our government's fault. Cedar Falls, you could even say it's our fault. But you alone in the country can change it. You can change it on Monday. That's the joy. If we reach up and get this value that's leaving your community and return it to you, then we can start making things work for you, your family, your town. Raise your hand if you knew that my flagship proposal is to give every American $1,000 a month. Now keep your hand up if you think that is too good to be true, unrealistic, will never happen. That's totally cool, I understand. But this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country. He called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we celebrated just last week, was fighting for this when he was killed in 1968. I know because I sat with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta, and he said that his father's vision was just this, a guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. It was so mainstream that 1,000 economists endorsed this plan in the 1960s, including Milton Friedman, one of the godfathers of modern economics. Passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice under Richard Nixon in '71, the Family Assistance Plan. And then 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A new study just came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you are not seeing a dime of it, then where is all of that money going? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, the trillion-dollar companies that are paying nothing or next to nothing back into our country. You know that feeling you had that there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes that's not great and that's depleting your community? It is. That's all happening. Raise your hand if you're a parent like me and my wife, Evelyn. If you're a parent, you have unfortunately had this sinking feeling that we're leaving our kids a future that is less bright, less secure, less prosperous than the lives that we have led as their parents. The reason we feel that way is because it's true. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, first, you look great. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there's a 93% chance you were going to do better than your parents did. That's the American dream. That's what we aspire to for our kids. That's what brought my family here. But if you were born in the 1990s in the United States of America, you're down to a 50-50 shot and it's declining fast. That is why parents feel the way we do. That is why our young people feel like the deck is stacked against them in ways that it was not for previous generations. Those things are true. How do we change that? How do we make it so that we're actually excited about our kids' futures again? Cedar Falls, this is what this election is about. On February 3rd, this is not about a pendulum swinging back and forth while our quality of life continues to decline. This is about turning things around. We can't act like Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up for years. And it's up to us, it is up to you to start curing the disease on Monday. And I'm just the Asian doctor for the job. So to a large extent, the disease is that we're in the midst of the greatest winner-take-all economy in the history of the world. It's just getting more extreme all the time. And I have to tell you, Cedar Falls, as someone who understands technology, this technology that's coming down the pike, it's getting smarter, faster, stronger, whereas we as human beings feel pretty fortunate to stay just about the same. You know what I mean? Like, it's a good day if we didn't get dumber that day. And this extreme winner-take-all economy, it's become a massive gulf between rural areas and big cities. It's made it so that many kids feel like they have to leave their community if they're going to have the kind of life or career that they want. The disparities just get bigger and wider, and it's about to take on unprecedented dimensions. So in this context, reaching up and getting some of this value that's leaving your community, getting us, getting you, your tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile and AI work unit, getting all that value and putting it back in your hands in a form of a dividend of $1,000 a month is the way to rebalance the economy and invest in us and our kids, particularly because after this money is in your hands, where will you actually spend it? How much of it would stay right here in Iowa? Most of it, that's right. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs we've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and the Women's Center, and local nonprofits, and religious organizations. Cedar Falls, this is the trickle-up economy, from our people, our families, and our communities up. This money would stay right here and start to revitalize towns with the needs and values and priorities of that community. This would also make it so we could look our kids in the eyes and say to them, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you and your future. We can make that real on Monday. This very dramatic seeming idea should have been implemented decades ago when it was right here, when it passed the US House in 1971. The reason we are where we are now is that that did not happen, and that the imbalances have grown literally more historic and extreme than at any point in our country's history. We have to balance it out. And if we do it right, we'll actually get ourselves and our kids excited about their future again for the first time in years. You know, when my wife and I were talking about the beginning of this campaign, she said, if this idea was so front and center 50, 60 years ago, why does it require you to like drag it back into the light today. Like, what the heck happened in the United States of America over those 50 or 60 years? And we thought about it and agreed that somewhere over the last 50 or 60 years, we've been collectively confused to think that economic value and human value are the same things. And that's what we have to change. We have to understand once again that we each have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens, and as shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. We're being told all the time about how great things are. Record high corporate profits, record high GDP, record low unemployment. And yet, once again, we do not feel like things are going great in our communities. And once again, we are right. Corporate profits are at record highs. What else are at record highs in the United States of America right now?
Suicides.
Substance abuse, overdoses, suicides, mental health problems, depression, anxiety, stress, student loan debt, financial insecurity, homelessness. Record lows in the United States of America right now. Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having a child. All of the hallmarks of a thriving society are at record lows in the US right now. This is why we feel the way we do. The problems are real. Again, it's been building up for years and decades. In many ways, Iowa is ground zero for this transformation. You've already seen it and felt it in the mechanization and consolidation of your farms. Then it moved to your factories, wiping out 40,000 manufacturing jobs, shuttering those towns for good. Now it's on your main streets, closing 30% of stores and malls. Eventually it will be on your highways. We have to turn this around immediately. If we do not take action, what happens over the next 4 years? The tech gets stronger, smarter, faster, more lights go out, robot trucks inch closer. Time is not on our side anymore. We have to make time on our side again. I know how off base the economic measurements are in terms of telling us how things are doing, in part because of my family. My wife Evelyn is at home with our 2 boys most every day. I used to say every day, but she's been campaigning now periodically, which has been a real joy. The family was in Iowa. The kids love Daddy's bus. I have my picture on the side. They don't really understand what Daddy's doing for a living. I just tell them Daddy has a very big deadline on Monday. Well, my wife Evelyn is at home with our 2 boys every day, one of whom is autistic. What is her work valued at in our economic measurements, the way we currently use them? She gets a 0. Evelyn, and how about every other stay-at-home parent in the country? That's a 0. How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? That's also a 0. And it's particularly relevant we're talking about this in the Women's Center because we all know that a disproportionate number of stay-at-home parents and caregivers are women. That more of the work that tends to get 0 value in our society is work that is falling on more and more women. And that if we can evolve in the way we actually measure our well-being and our progress, we can actually start to properly recognize and even reward the work that women do every single day to make us healthier and stronger. So it's not just stay-at-home parents that get a 0 or caregivers that get a 0. How about volunteers and activists in our communities? Generally a 0 as well, right? Most mentors trying to look out for people, 0. This is going to be rough. 90% of artists, 0, close to 0. One thing we don't talk about a lot, but it's really vital, local journalists. Almost 2,000 newspapers have gone out of business over the last number of months because all of their advertising revenue went up to the internet. You can't run a newspaper on that. There are 200 counties in the United States now that don't have a local news source at all. What doesn't work very well if you don't have local news? Democracy, because how can you vote on what's going on in your community if literally no one is even covering what's going on in your community? Cedar Falls, these are the things we're supposed to value most in our lives. Our kids, our families, our community, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. They're getting zeroed out because we have been collectively conditioned to think that somehow we work for the economy. And I'm saying that we have to make the economy start working for us and our families. thank me for running for president, and I say thank my wife, Emily. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, she let me run. But two, I know she's been sacrificing much more than anyone in our family, keeping our family strong and whole over the last number of years. She's been working harder than I do. I was off the trail for a little while, taking care of the boys, and I said, get me back to doing something easier, like running for president. I mean, I love the boys, I'll tell you. Yeah, my parents know what I mean. I mean, it's really difficult work. And we're not valuing it properly. And because we're not valuing it properly, we're suffering. Here's a list of countries in the world that do not have paid family leave for new mothers. United States of America, Papua New Guinea. That's the whole list. And I'm going to tell you like something that's going to, I thought it was really terrible, but it's sort of funny. I'm going to share it in a second. I was with Dave Chappelle a couple nights ago. I was like watching him take his water breaks. So I memorized a list of countries that don't have paid family leave for new moms a year ago. And that list was United States of America, Papua New Guinea, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Liberia. And you know what happened in the last year? Lesotho, Swaziland, and Liberia passed. He's left us alone with Papua New Guinea. Can you believe that? What are we doing in the United States of America? Like, it's ridiculous. You have like a list of every country in the world, and it's like us and Papua New Guinea. We haven't figured out that, you know, it might be a good idea for a mom to spend time with a kid she just delivered. Like, that might be a positive move. Pathologically, like, brainwashed we are to think that everything is about like, oh, like capital efficiency, you know, like good for business. It's terrible for business not giving moms paid family leave, because you know what happens? They don't come back to work. And then if you lose that person, then you're much, much worse off than if you actually had paid family leave and gave them a runway so that they can continue in your work. It's so dumb. It makes me so angry. So one of the ways we can transform what we're doing right now, we're losing on an epic scale because our country writ large is pretending that what's good for the big companies' bottom line is good for us. You know, it just keeps saying, it's like, oh, but corporate profits are up, corporate profits are up. It's like, oh, well, you know, I kind of care about everything else on this list more than corporate profits. So, as your president, I will actually say, look, GDP is a measurement we made up 100 years ago. And even the inventor of GDP 100 years ago said this: this is a terrible measurement of national well-being, and we should not use it as that. Oh, yeah, you can look it up. And here we are 100 years later, riding it off a cliff. Does that make sense to anyone? Robot trucks will be great for both corporate profits and GDP. They're going to be really bad for a lot of people. So as your president, I will modernize our economic measurements to focus on us and our families. Instead of GDP and corporate profits, we will use health and life expectancy, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, clean air and clean water. Proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances, childhood success rates. These are the real measures of how we are doing, and as your president, I will present these real numbers to you every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in my State of the Union. If you like that visual, this is probably the campaign you should caucus for. You'd be like, I should caucus for it just because I want to see that deck. It is almost, actually no, it is impossible to solve a problem if you don't know it exists. And that's where we are right now as a country. If you had the right measurements, you would see we're in a mental health crisis, we're in a wellness depression, we're in a volunteerism and civic engagement depression. And that's where this confusion is that Donald Trump said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America is already great. And that did not work for a lot of people. because the problems are real. We have to start solving those problems together on Monday to help move this country forward. Donald Trump got some of the problems right, but his solutions were not what we need. What were his solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Cedar Falls, you know we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. And I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Cedar Falls. You may not know this, but math is an acronym. What does it stand for?
Make America think harder.
Make America think harder. That's right. That's your job on Monday. It's your job to move this country we love so much. Not left, not right, but forward. And I know that's just where you will take us on Monday at 6:30. Thank you so much. I think you have some questions. Can I hold it? I'll hold it for you. Say, your mom is regretting this slightly. I'm about to give you a break, I know. It's a lot of energy.
She has ADHD and autism, so she's a little bit more hard for me sometimes.
Well, I know how that is, and I'm glad you have it diagnosed early on because you know you can do more. And I personally found it a massive relief when we actually had our diagnosis. But they're a lot of work.
It is.
So I appreciate the heck out of you. You're a superhero. Let's give her a round of
Yeah.
applause. Anytime you need her to be quiet, just assemble a crowd of a couple hundred Good, she's quiet again. All right, it works. Any other babies that need soothing?
The White House. Donald Trump.
I mean, am I really speaking for baby?
I said Donald Trump was the thing.
Question away.
Yeah, the first time I met you was at the Cowley's event at the Universalist Church on Cedar Heights in Waterloo, and we had a little bit more of a serious discussion about how your UBI would help some of my family members and stuff, so I'll give you a light one this time. I see Zach tweeted that you've had 44 events in 12 days. I just want to know how you keep your energy up and your stamina after all that.
Well, thanks for the question.
Oh, before you answer, I'd like to say one thing. Last night I volunteered to become a precinct captain.
Woo!
So if anybody here is from the Dyke area, Grundy P5, come see me.
I love that. I gotta say it's invigorating because it's so close to voting. I've been campaigning for the better part of 2 years. This is my 25th trip to Iowa. And so now that we're on the cusp of voting, my energy is high because I'm so excited. It also helps to have a big bus, because you go back to the bus and you can like stretch your legs and stare at the picture of yourself on the side. No, you can't. But it's easier to keep my energy high because of the energy around the campaign. I mean, crowds were not like this when we started out in 2018. This is awesome. This is what I've been fighting for years now. I'm not running for president because I dreamt about being president of the United States. You can trust me on that. Those were not the conversations in the Yang household. I'm running for president because I've seen the future that lies ahead for our kids and I want to give them something better. And the fact that we're this close to actually making that reality on Monday is all the energy I need.
Hello, I've got a question. Right here. I like the idea of UBI and all those things, but how is that going to bring the jobs? I mean, I do understand that some business and economy will get a boost, but they may also raise the prices knowing that you got $1,000. And the other thing is that you're not still going to stop the trucks from being automated. How do you foresee jobs will increase in this country? Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. So here's the great thing about this money circulating in our economy is that, let's say it goes to car repairs and daycare expenses and Little League signups and the Women's Center. Do you think that the garage or the daycare or the nonprofit or this place might have to hire another person if it had more demand? And so you end up with, here in Iowa alone, about 40,000 new jobs created just by the fact that there's more money circulating through the economy. And that creates this really effective foundation. And the new jobs that get created, many of them would be things that might not even exist right now that people have always kind of wanted. Because, and here's an example I use, but there are better examples, but I'll use the one I have. Let's say you wanted to start a bakery here in Cedar Falls. Right now, may or may not be a good idea. But if there's an extra $1,000 a month in buying power in everyone's hands, then all of a sudden, maybe you think, hey, this is a good idea. And then you can start it, you hire a few people, and if it doesn't work out, you know you're not going to starve to death because you still have your $1,000 a month yourself to fall back on. So then you'd end up with jobs that get created in a new business that might not have existed if not for the buying power that's flowing through the community. And so it's not just that bakery, it's a whole host of new creative and entrepreneurial and even artistic endeavors. And that ends up helping humanize our economy and help us evolve away from all of these industries that frankly we're not going to restore the employment basis of in many, many cases. If we were to manufacture even more in the United States, which we will, we're not going to employ as many people because a lot more of it's just being done by robots and machines. You're going to have fewer humans ministering to that. You talked about the automation of trucking. I'm open to trying to slow that down if necessary to maintain our way of life. But I think saying, hey, we're gonna shoot ourselves in the foot and not make progress is a terrible way to run our lives, country, economy. And it really would be shooting ourselves in the foot versus other economies, because if you're saying, hey, humans have to drive trucks, and then Europe and Asia and everyone else is like, hey, robot trucks, the cost savings between robots and humans in that industry are estimated to be literally hundreds of billions of dollars a year. So you'd be taking on extra hundreds of billions of dollars in expense to maintain jobs that maybe you could literally, the money that's on the table is literally so vast, you could pay all of the truckers their current salaries and still save billions of dollars. So it may not make sense to say, hey, let's make sure humans drive trucks forever, if there might be some other things we can put in place that would assist. To me, trucking is such a massive transition that it isn't something you can just let happen on its own. I would be focused on that industry and say, look, 3.5 million Americans, most of them men, we can't just let them all get kicked to the curb by robot trucks. We have to have literally an effective nationwide plan in effect to make sure it doesn't happen haphazardly, but it happens in a way that we actually have mapped out.
question.
Are we losing?
Yeah, we gotta go.
I think this is the most election in my entire lifetime. It's the most important one. I think it's very good if you explain very clearly how you will pay for us to get this $1,000 a month, because it will benefit college students who need less loans, it'll benefit stay-at-home moms, it'll benefit caregivers. But we need to know it's gonna be paid for without us paying more taxes.
So I'll address that, and then I'm gonna address a bigger election question, because I agree this is the most important election maybe in our lifetimes. There's an old joke by Willie Sutton, the bank robber. It's like, why did you rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. If we want to put this value into our hands, we have to go where the money is. And where is that value right now? It's in the hands of the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and the Microsofts. It's also in the hands of the Pfizers and the Monsantos and like all this crew. Like I'm a numbers guy, and some of the returns that some of these companies have been hoarding and generating are way out of line with historical norms. And so if we balance it out and get, again, a tiny fair share, and this tax plan I'm championing is actually already in effect in the vast majority of developed countries in the world. Because other countries looked up and said, hey, Amazon should not be paying zero taxes. How do we stop that? So they put in place a value-added tax that gets the public a tiny sliver of every transaction. We should do the same thing. I'm not that creative a guy. I like to just find something that's worked someplace and say, we should probably do that here. So that is the plan. Economists have looked at it, and Gregory Mankiw, who is one of like the senior most economic advisors, looked at it and said that Gang's plan is the best plan on offer in the Democratic field. So that's how we pay for it. We just go where the money is, get our fair share, and return it to you. This value-added tax I'm suggesting would generate between $800 billion and $1 trillion a year with a big up arrow attached to it, because a lot of the value that we're talking about is going to go up a lot in the years to come. Then we get back billions in things like incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room healthcare, things that we spend hundreds of billions on right now. We'd also get a lot of it back in economic growth because of all the new businesses and jobs that get created. All of that ends up growing the tax base. And here's the one that I think many of you will love. One study showed that if we were to do this, we would increase our GDP by $700 billion a year just on the basis of making ourselves and our children better educated and healthier. And this is before you take into account the level of entrepreneurship and creativity and even risk-taking that would benefit from people feeling like they have a foundation that they're securing. So the trickle-up economy pays for itself, at least in some measure, but it has to start with us getting our fair share of the corporate revenues that we're not getting our fair share of right now. Now, to your question about this is the most important election of our time, I agree. And I want to share a few facts with you that I believe make me the best candidate in November. What's the most important criteria that Democrats have for the nominee?
Win.
Beat Donald Trump. That's right. I am the strongest candidate to beat Donald Trump, hands down. And I'm going to give you a few numbers to tell you why. First, there are people on the internet who gamble money on these things. I am the heaviest favorite to beat Donald Trump head-to-head of any candidate in the race. So then you ask, why do all these people think that Andrew Yang is the best candidate to beat Donald Trump? It's because they've looked at the numbers. 18% of college Republicans say they would support me over Trump in the general. In one poll, 10% of Trump voters in New Hampshire said they would support me over Trump in the general. You know who has figured this out? Donald Trump. I am the only candidate in the field he has not tweeted about. Because one, he knows I'm better at the internet than he is. And two, what are his most potent attacks? You're a corrupt DC politician. None of that works on me. I can make him look utterly ridiculous. Well, I mean, you think, but the fact is, you know what I mean. Like, you imagine that. And you know how we know this is because a senior Trump advisor was caught on video saying in one of those private meetings, if there's someone we're worried about, it's Andrew Yang. More and more people are realizing this, but if we win Iowa, which I believe we have a real shot at doing on Monday, I guarantee we'll win New Hampshire, because New Hampshire, there's a lot of support for this campaign. The third party in New Hampshire is Libertarians, and they kind of love a lot of the stuff we're talking about. But if I get to a head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump, I will beat him hands down. I'm already drawing thousands of his supporters. Like, his attacks don't work on me at all. And the biggest thing is that I'm focused on solving the problems that got him elected in the first place. I don't demonize him or his supporters. We just need to actually get to work curing the disease that got him elected. And that's one reason why I'm going to be your next president a year from now. Thank you all very much.
Let's give it up to the next president of the United States, Mr. Andrew Yang. So guys, we have to take Andrew at 9 o'clock. He's going to hang out and mingle for a bit if you want a quick photo, but we do have to take him. It's a 17-day bus tour. This is how this works. But he'd love to say hi to a couple as he walks out. Thank you all for being here. Monday night, 6:30 p.m. We need you, okay? Thank you guys.